Fire down below. The flickering neon light of the rest stop sign cut through the heavy Iowa night, illuminating nothing but the endless sea of cornfields and the isolated highway. Greg Turner turned the wheel of his beat-up SUV, the tires crunching against the gravel as he pulled into the lot. His wife, Jenna, was in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone, while their 6-year-old daughter, Lily, snored softly in the back. "We'll just be a minute," Jenna said, unbuckling her seatbelt. She shook Lily gently awake. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's stretch our legs." Greg nodded, leaning back against the headrest. "I'll wait here. Don't take too long. This place gives me the creeps." Jenna smirked and stepped out, holding Lily's hand as they headed toward the dimly lit rest stop building. Greg watched them disappear inside, the door creaking shut behind them. Then he leaned back and closed his eyes, letting the muffled hum of cicadas lull him into a light doze. When he opened his eyes again, something felt wrong. His watch read 11:17 p.m. They'd been gone for almost 20 minutes. Too long. Greg grabbed his phone and tried calling Jenna, but the line went straight to voicemail. A chill crept down his spine as he climbed out of the car and approached the rest stop. The door swung open easily, revealing an empty, flickering hallway. He called out, "Jenna? Lily?" His voice echoed, but there was no reply. His stomach churned as he searched the building, moving from the bathrooms to the vending machines. Nothing. They were gone. His footsteps quickened as panic took hold. Just as he was about to run back to the car and call 911, something caught his eye. A massive oak tree on the edge of the rest stop, its branches gnarled and twisted. At the base of the tree was a large hole, roughly the size of a doorway. Inside, it was pitch black, but something about it seemed to hum, pulling him closer. Against every instinct, Greg stepped closer. The air grew cold, and an earthy, rotting smell filled his nostrils. "Jenna? Lily?" he called again, his voice trembling. Then he heard it, a faint cry, Lily's voice. "Daddy?" Greg didn't hesitate. He ducked into the hole, his feet finding a strange, smooth surface beneath the dirt. The moment he was fully inside, the ground gave way, and he began to descend as if riding an invisible elevator. The walls blurred as he dropped lower and lower, the faint cries of his daughter growing louder. When the descent finally stopped, Greg stumbled forward, emerging into an underground cavern illuminated by an eerie green glow. His heart stopped. In the distance stood a town unlike anything he'd ever seen. The buildings were jagged and spiked, constructed from black stone that glistened like scales. The streets teemed with movement, but it wasn't people. They were lizard-like creatures, their bodies humanoid but covered in slick, shimmering scales. Their eyes glowed yellow and their forked tongues flicked in and out as they moved. Greg ducked behind a rock, his breathing shallow. "What the hell is this place?" he whispered. He scanned the scene, and his heart sank when he spotted the center of the city. A massive wooden cage hung suspended over a pit filled with hay and timber. Inside the cage, he saw Jenna clutching Lily tightly, both of them terrified. The lizard creatures circled the pit, hissing and snapping at each other, clearly preparing for some kind of ritual. Greg's fists clenched. He had to save them. But how? Greg crept closer, sticking to the shadows. His eyes darted around, looking for anything he could use as a weapon. He spotted a pile of jagged stones and grabbed a couple, tucking them into his pocket. The lizard creatures were chanting now, their voices echoing through the cavern. One of them, larger than the rest, stood at the front, its body adorned with primitive jewelry made of bones. It raised a clawed hand, silencing the others, and hissed something unintelligible. The creatures erupted in cheers, their excitement palpable. Greg knew he didn't have much time. He spotted a ladder leading up to the cage and started toward it, keeping low. Just as he reached the base, a sharp hiss sounded behind him. He spun around and came face to face with one of the creatures. It was smaller than the leader, but just as menacing, its yellow eyes narrowing as it opened its mouth to shriek. Greg acted on instinct. He swung the jagged rock in his hand, smashing it against the creature's head. It crumpled to the ground with a sickening thud. Greg didn't wait to see if it was dead. He scrambled up the ladder, his heart pounding. "Greg!" Jenna's voice was hoarse, her eyes wide with shock and relief. Lily reached out for him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm getting you out of here," Greg whispered. He examined the cage's lock. It was a crude mechanism, but it was sturdy. He yanked at it, but it wouldn't budge. Below, the lizard creatures noticed the commotion. Their leader let out a deafening roar, and the crowd surged toward the ladder. Greg's mind raced. He couldn't fight them all. But then he noticed the pit below, the hay, the timber. He had an idea. "Jenna, do you have a lighter?" he asked urgently. Jenna's eyes widened in understanding. She fumbled in her pocket and handed him the small silver lighter she always carried. Greg climbed down the ladder just as the first of the lizard creatures began to ascend. He flicked the lighter, the flame sputtering to life, and set the hay ablaze. The fire spread quickly, the dry timber catching almost instantly. The creatures screeched in panic, recoiling from the flames. Smoke filled the cavern, thick and choking. Greg climbed back up and smashed the lock with the rock until it broke. The cage door swung open, and he pulled Jenna and Lily out. "This way," he said, leading them down the ladder on the opposite side. The fire was spreading fast, engulfing the pit and sending the creatures into chaos. They ran through the streets, dodging panicked lizard people. The exit to the cavern was visible in the distance, but the leader spotted them and let out an ear-splitting roar. It charged after them, its claws scraping against the ground. Greg turned and threw one of the rocks, hitting it square in the face. The creature staggered, but kept coming. Jenna grabbed a metal rod lying on the ground and swung it as the creature lunged. The makeshift weapon connected with its head, and it crumpled to the ground. "Go," Greg said, pulling them toward the exit. They reached the base of the elevator shaft just as the fire consumed the city. The ground rumbled, and the cavern began to collapse. The invisible force lifted them up the shaft, carrying them back to the surface. They emerged into the cool night air, gasping for breath. Behind them, the ground caved in, swallowing the tree and the rest stop. For a moment, they just sat there, trembling and holding each other. Then Greg spoke. "Let's never stop at a rest stop again." Jenna let out a shaky laugh, tears streaming down her face. "Agreed." They climbed into the SUV, leaving the cursed place behind. As they drove away, none of them noticed the faint glow of yellow eyes watching them from the shadows of the cornfields.